What am I in the mood for? Stationary gear bearing for an RX-7? Yeah, that sounds pretty good. G'day, Internet. I think this is a great place to start off the fixing video. Felix, stop eating styrofoam. Here is my new eccentric shaft. I just opened the box. This is from a guy named Eric in Quebec that I got in contact with whenever I reached out on Facebook in one of the groups and said, hey, I need an E-shaft. Man, he packaged this thing up really, really well. He's got like shop towels around everything with tape, and he's like made this fortress of stuff. I'm gonna have to throw this stuff out ASAP, and it's also getting all over my cat. But what matters is that my E-shaft shows up without getting damaged, which I think it has. And I assume that's stack gear, another stack gear. Exciting. Damn it. Yeah, the base of this package is a piece of plywood. And then he's got everything zip tied to it. Man, he took some serious time out of his day to package this up for me. Thank you so much, Eric. This is awesome. Reminder, I paid $150 for all of this, which is basically free. And he did a bang-up job packaging it up. Really nice of that guy. I'm doing something kind of sketchy right now, so of course you guys are going to be interested. So here's the old E-shaft. I got it in the vise here. There's the Damage. And I kind of forgot, this would have been a cheap, easy thing to order. I forgot to order a new pilot bearing. So the new E-shaft has a pilot bearing in it, but I don't trust it. So I have a brand new one. It just happens to have been pressed into here. So I just got it out. I did manage to get it out, but did I do any damage to it? It's probably still 1,000,000 degrees. Yeah, it's still pretty hot. Great success. Didn't do any damage to it. This is what I used to do that. This is a 3-jaw puller thing that attaches to my slide hammer that I ground down a little bit because the original ones were too chunky, so I ground one down. I did this a while ago, whenever I did this the first time, and then I put a piece of tape on top of it because it is kind of, the way I had it jammed in there, it is kind of resting up against the top of it, so I wanted to minimize the chances of messing anything up, and it looks pretty good. So, normally, you would press this bearing out or in with the use of a hydraulic press. I don't have one. I would like one someday, but I've had a 100% success rate pressing these in and out so far. I've done it a couple times with my press kit for wheel bearings. Allow me to demonstrate. Ooh, there. There you go. Not hard, is it? Whenever you have all the right stuff picked out already. What's difficult is figuring out all the right bits to use. Yesterday I went to Canadian Tire and I bought this for this specific purpose. It is a 1 5/16 3/4 inch drive socket. So it fits over this, and it's exactly the right size to press out these bearings. So this particular bearing is the one, this is an unknown one from some other engine that came in my new front stationary gear that I got from Eric. What am I in the mood for? Stationary gear bearing for an RX-7? Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Man, that was a close one. But she's in like sin.
What it is I'm made for. Kinda feels like I should know the way to what it is I came through. Kinda feels like, caught up in the
Very nice.
fast life, fast life, fast life, fast life, fast life, fast life, fast life. Caught up in the fast life.
Time for the part that I was looking forward to absolutely the least, and that is evacuating all of the bits of destroyed bearing out of the oil system. So I'm going to take each plate and rotor individually, and we're going to use a bunch of degreaser. We're going to use a bunch of brake clean very carefully where we're not hitting our paint. And we're using the pressure washer, and we also got the air compressor going. So we're just going to keep going with the crap and the cleaning stuff until this is all nice and clean. I'll put a little layer of oil on the front surface, and then we'll bag it up in a fresh bag, and it'll be ready for the install. Let it be known that I cleaned this crap out real good. That should go out the oil strainer. Oh yeah. Ooh, it's a nice fun surprise. So, oil initially gets picked up there. It goes from this side of the pump to this side of the pump, so that the pump takes it from there, shoves it over here. Then it goes through this tube and out into the front cover. So this is where that O-ring goes that can fail really easily. So it goes into the front cover, into the oil cooler, then into the back of the engine, then into the filter. Then it splits off in a couple of different directions. It goes to the rear iron, and then it goes to the front iron as well. And the way it gets to the front iron, it's kind of funny because like this is where the oil starts, but it goes all the way through the engine and the oil cooler and everything, and then it gets fed back into here through the top dowel. And you know that that's true because I just blew into that hole in the bearing and it shot out up there. So oil at the very end goes through there, boop boop boop, into the bearing. And whenever the bearing spins, that hole doesn't line up anymore and it's getting zero oiling. So like as soon as you spin the bearing, it is just catastrophe time until you fix it. Sunk all 3 of them on the first go. Alright, if we sink this, it signifies good luck for this rebuild. There it is. There it is. Alright, the engine has been stacked. The tension bolts have been installed and torqued to 29 foot-pounds. And it is almost 2 in the morning. I'm going to sleep. See you tomorrow. Alright, pissed off Giles alert. I'm pissed off. So I stacked this last night, and after I tightened all the tension bolts for the first time, I noticed that the eccentric shaft had no play back and forth. And I was like, that's weird. So I undid all the tension bolts, and then everything was free after I took the top plate off. And then I just kind of moved the rotor a little bit, and then I tightened that back on, and the eccentric shaft had front and back play again, so I was like, sweet. And then this morning, I went to check how easy it is to turn it over after putting both of the stationary gears on it, and it feels awful. It feels terrible to turn over. With my torque adapter thing, it takes like 30 foot-pounds to turn this thing over. I tried not to spin it over too much, but I have to know what we're working with. So I guess I'm gonna undo the friggin' 6 hours of work that I did yesterday stacking this and take it apart. Probably what's going on is I may not have pushed the apex seals all the way down, and it may have allowed the springs to get out from where they're supposed to be. That's pretty easy to have happen. And I watched a video from Rad Potential where he had this exact same problem, where his corners got messed up. I mean, mine are super glued, so I don't know if that's the problem or not. I don't think it should be this tight just from putting new bearings in it. Like, it really does not feel proper. When I did the last engine build, we were able to just put the counterweight on this shaft and turn it over by hand. You certainly cannot do that with this, so... Alright, so I took everything back apart again. Really didn't take me that long. It's not that big of a deal. It's just super annoying because I thought I just finished this and got to a certain checkpoint, and I really didn't. So... here's 2 things that I think could have been causing the extra resistance. I didn't push the oil control rings in that far, and in the manual they say to push them an extra 0.5 millimeter down past the surface, and how you do that is you use an old seal, and you use that to push it down. So I'm going to take both of the rotors. I already did this one, and it looks like they're sitting a little bit more flush than on this one. So that might have been causing a little bit of extra resistance. What I think the real problem was is the last time that I glued the apex seals, I was a little bit smarter about it. I don't know why I didn't do it this time. I just didn't think it mattered for some reason. I glued them pretty much exactly the width of the housings. So none of the glue broke on any of these apex seals, which is amazing. even though I didn't even spin this over a full revolution. I probably spun it over like a third of a turn. I didn't want to spin it too much because there was a lot of resistance. And these are all still glued, and they're like just exactly the same width as this, maybe a tiny little bit wider. So what I did last time is these were about 1/2 mil or a mil too long intentionally, so that whenever you torque the tension bolts down, these would all break. Like the super glue would break by design, by intention. And this time, I think the super glue was holding on for dear life, and these were getting squeezed. And if I started to run this, it probably would have fixed itself. But I'm not about to go and try and run an engine that takes 30 foot-pounds to turn over. I have to look into this and inspect it. So I'm going to break the super glue on every single one of these. I'm going to glue them like I did the first time, intentionally too long. We're going to push the oil control rings in the extra 1/2 millimeter, and we're going to assemble everything again and hope for better. Here we are again with a stacked engine, and we are pleased with the resistance now. Before, it really made me cringe turning it over, and it just made my mechanical sympathy go nuts. It felt like it was more difficult in certain areas than other areas, and it just felt like I was trying to overcome metal getting crushed together. I don't know if it was the apex seals. The apex seals were actually glued a little bit too short, and none of them broke, which is why none of them broke whenever I torqued all of this down. So I don't believe the apex seals were the reason. The oil control rings being squished out a little bit extra shouldn't have made it feel as terrible as it did. Like, I really just squished them down a little bit more. The only other thing I did that I haven't talked about yet is I hammered in the gear that's inside each rotor. It's a separate piece. So the gear part that has the teeth is a different piece of metal compared to the rotor. And they are held together with spring pins. It's a weird design. And under normal circumstances, that gear just stays with the rotor and it's not a problem. But if you get a lot of vibration, or you're running like a 9,000 RPM engine and you didn't balance it correctly, you can get that gear lifting away from the rotor, and then it's too wide for its home and it starts chewing up your irons. So I actually did notice, I didn't get any on video, but I actually did notice that on the very, very inside of the plate, like around the inner circle, it looked like there may have been some scuff marks from the gear from each rotor, and it was minor enough because I only turned it over like a third of a turn. It looked like that may have been the reason why it was binding. So it was one of those three things, or a combination of all three. But check this out now. That is exactly what I would like it to feel like. So we fixed whatever the problem was. When I looked at the gears that were on the rotors, they really looked flush. They did not look like they were rising up or anything. It was really difficult to actually measure if it was doing anything. I tried to, but, you know, I had other things. I had more important stuff to be doing. So I just gave it a couple of whacks with the big whacka and one of my press tools. Gave both of them the same treatment, and I don't know. So we tried to fix three things in hopes that it fixed the problem, and the problem is fixed. Yay. Alright, it's Tuesday now, and I'm just kind of slowly picking away at the remaining tasks before this thing can go back in the car. Check this out. Here is my trimmed RX-8 gasket that we're using for the front cover. The reason that I went out of my way to get one of these instead of just using a paper gasket again is because it deletes the O-ring, and instead of using an O-ring, it uses this. The whole thing is a stamped metal gasket that has a thin layer of some engineered rubber on both sides, and it is like bead rolled along everywhere that it needs to seal, so it kind of uses a different approach. And no more O-ring, so you don't got to worry about that at all. So this fits perfectly, except for that, which doesn't really matter. I thought about trimming there and there, but I decided against it because it's probably going to fold right there as soon as I hold the gasket, because it'll be really thin. So I just left that, but the rest of everything lines up perfectly, and I had to trim along here, and I had to trim that right there. There's like a whole section that goes up there. This is what the RX-8 one has. I think that one lines up, and this one kind of doesn't. Yeah, this is what used to be there. And there was a section down here where this was really thick, so it really wasn't that hard to trim it for GSL SE 4-port 13B use. So I've checked my end play. Maybe I'll throw in a video or a couple pictures of whenever I checked that. It's at 2.2 thou, which is perfect. And I've cleaned this surface with acetone and brake clean just to get rid of the gasket sealant that I put on it last time. Everything's nice and dry. I cleaned the gasket, so I need to go grab the front cover, and I think we're ready to install the front cover. Beginning to work on cleaning out this oil cooler. So what I did with it is I took it off the car, I drained out all the oil over a couple hours while I was doing some other stuff. And then I shot like an entire can of brake clean through it, and I made sure that I went all the way down, shook it around a bit, all the way back, let it sit for a bit, shook the whole thing around a bunch, and then I dumped all that out. But there was still a bunch of brake clean in there, and I put a bunch of, this has been outside for a while, which is why it looks so screwed up, but it's degreaser. And I think I've created some sort of chemical reaction. This is interesting. Yeah, you can see it breaking down the oil, getting that shit out of there. So I filled it up, so it was at an angle, I filled it up with the degreaser like all the way. And it's been doing this for a while. And just for fun, I held both of my thumbs over the exits, and you can imagine what happened. It pressurized and it shot stuff into my face whenever I took my thumb off of it. So, I don't know, it's kind of interesting.
Gotta leave this part in. You getting down from
Yeah.
off the car.
Yeah. I'll definitely leave that in.
Spark plugs now or when it's in?
Probably a bit later, cause
Oh yeah,
I'm gonna use the spark plugs that were in it. I know new would be better, but I've already bought like 4 sets of spark plugs for this thing. These are lightly used. I'm gonna clean them up a little bit.
And it'll also make it easier to rotate and
That's true.
Yes. Transmission.
Yeah. Alright, it's almost go time. So right now I have the spark and the fuel disconnected because I want to see that there's oil coming out of the oil line that would normally go to my gauge. I'm being a little bit anal, and I disconnected it just so that I could flush the oil out of this line. I really doubt that would ever matter, but it also lets me verify that there is in fact oil reaching the engine, and oil has just reached the engine. This is good news. That means that the system is primed, the cooler got filled. I've been cranking it over for quite a while. I'm trying not to fry my starter or kill my battery. But the oil cooler was completely emptied, so obviously that's going to take a fair bit of oil in order to fill it before it reaches the engine, which is what this is really monitoring. So I'm going to bolt that back up, and David's going to come over here in just a minute, and we're going to fire this thing up. Wish me luck. First startup of the new engine. Let's go.
It's trying.
I hope that it's probably about to start. I just wanted to make sure I didn't get any of my ignition wires wrong. I've never heard it sound quite like that. L1. Going to L1. T2. T1. Going to T1. L2. Going to L. That one. Yep, everything's right. It's probably just not happy with the incredible amount of premix that's inside the engine.
That's true, yeah. This time with proper spark.
That's what we like to see. I mean, it is cold, but still, that's great. I miss you so much, buddy.
Makes it so much easier whenever the spark is in the right spot.
When it's not off by, like, I'm sure so many degrees. Yeah. Yeah. I was a little sleep deprived whenever I was, well, not sleep deprived, but I was tired. I finished this at 2 in the morning.
Don't see anything yet. I think we're good. Snappy with that muffler on it.
With the second muffler?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. thermostat opens. I did fill it up quite a bit. It's definitely open. It's steaming now. Good, 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 good. It remembers how to prep. So it is currently the day after we fired this thing up for the first time, and we are stoked. So it makes 40 psi of oil pressure at idle when it is fully warmed up, and before we had 5. So I'm thrilled with that. I would have killed for that pressure reading before, and I don't really know what to say. The engine is working as well as it was before, but now the front bearing isn't chewing itself to bits and it's actually making proper oil pressure. One thing I didn't mention that I'm just thinking about right now is I did shim the rear regulator and the front relief valve this go around, so I haven't revved it high enough to know exactly what it hits now, but it should be like 85, 90 psi, just because this is a 200 horsepower engine and not a 120 horsepower engine like it was designed to be in the first place. So I think we need to go for a celebratory drive. Before we do that, I want to talk about one thing. And that is that I'm getting some weird behavior with my transmission where the gear shifter, whenever it heats up and gets really nice and warm, like the transmission fluid, the shifter feels terrible to get in and out of gear. Mostly out of gear, especially from like 3rd to 4th. You have to like reef on the gear stick to get it out of gear. But it feels completely fine when it's cold. And even for the first like 10 minutes of your drive, it feels completely fine. So that seems like hopefully an issue with the gear oil. So I made sure that there was enough gear oil in this, but I never did a full flush from the original stuff. So this is what came out of there. Pretty black and murky. So I went and I splurged a Canadian Tire, and I got Royal Purple. And they only had 2 75W90s. So we're doing a tiny bit of experimenting, and so this takes 2.5 liters. I did 2 liters of this and half a liter of that for a little bit of extra thickness, just to see. I don't think it's going to hurt anything. Online, I was reading that some people fill it completely with 140 weight if they're in hotter climates, and it makes their transmission feel better. I just want to take one moment to complain about how much I frigging hate filling up gear oil. It is my least favorite job of all time because I don't have a lift. I'm doing it on the ground. And I used to have one of these pumps that had an in and an out, and I really hated that because you'd be underneath the car trying to prevent this thing from falling over and keeping that tube at the bottom and the other tube in the transmission without falling out, and you're trying to hold this thing while your hands are covered in gear oil and you're trying to reef the thing with all your might, trying to force all the fluid through. So I upgraded, quote unquote, to this single one, which is better, but I still hate it. Mostly because mine is a piece of junk from Princess Auto, and it is leaking like crazy from here, and it got worse as I was doing this job, so I'm going to throw this out now that I'm done with it. It's already a bad enough job without this thing squirting out your very expensive gear oil onto your elbow and into your hair if you're me. I made an absolutely massive mess. I've made a lot of messes when doing this job, which is why I hate it so much. I have a bad history with doing this, but I just got friggin' purple gear oil all over the place. I think that's going to be something that I invest in next. Do they make like a pump that goes on the top of one of these quart bottles? That would be cool. I'm imagining that is a thing that could exist. Could you get like a pump that sucks from the bottom of one of these bottles and then you just stick this line into your trans? It would still be a little bit messy, but it'd be a hell of a lot better than trying to suck it out and then get underneath the car with this without it dripping all over the place. And yeah. Anyway, winding session done. We got the royal purple in there. Let's go for a drive. Oh, it still sounds every bit as beautiful as it did before. So, I'm just gonna rev it up to 4,000, which is as high as I'm allowed to with the break-in procedure right now. Actually, I'm not gonna do that at all because it's cold. But whenever I rev it to 3 or 4, whenever I rev it to 4, it goes a little bit past 75. And before, it would never go past 70 by design because of the regulator. So, we're now allowing ourselves to hit a higher operating pressure. Sounds like a good idea to me. I'm allowed to film while driving if it's on my own property, right? The shifter return spring, whenever you move it over to the left, is always a little bit weak, but that'll be our baseline. So right now it is returning. If I give it the slap, it does return. And like, see, I'm just effortlessly just kind of flicking it around with my wrist. Wham bam, slamming gears in the RX, having a grand old time. So by the end of this drive, we'll compare this clip to the next clip, and hopefully you can visualize the difference. Yeah, I'm not exactly proud of this one. This one did not go to plan at all. Fluids exploded out of it, and fluids were exploding on the way into it. This is all it leaking. Well, I mean, it's not really my fault. It's my stupid, shitty tool from Princess Auto leaking out gear fluid. And also some of that is from whenever I filled it up all the way and then it spilled. Anyway, I got a mess to clean up, but I don't care. We're going for a rippity-doo-dah. So overall, fixing this, knock on wood, I hope it's fixed. That took basically $1,000, like I guessed, in 3 weeks. So, did it pretty quickly. Big shout out to my buddy David for helping me out installing this engine back in the car and starting it up with me. Have to be careful to not drive this like I did before the engine rebuild. So we're back to break-in. Not going over 4,000 RPM. Once again, I'm kind of making up the break-in procedure because nobody online can agree what you should do. Mazda says you basically don't need to do it, but just don't actually race the engine for the first little bit. Racing Beat has rather extreme advice that a lot of people agree is excessively extreme, where you're not done until like 2,000 miles, it'd be like 3,000 kilometers. There's also talk about people doing 60-kilometer intervals where you drive it really hard right off the bat, which is controversial, but there's arguments behind it. Google rotary break-in running hard and read what everybody's arguing about. So there's also that train of thought. So nobody knows. Nobody can agree. It's like cooking. You just add a little bit of spice until it feels right. So because I'm breaking in bearings this time, I guess I was breaking in bearings last time too, but whatever. And we're going to do 800 kilometers under 4,000 RPM, and then under 5,000 RPM, still low throttle for another 500, and then probably like, I don't know, I wrote it down on my phone what I was planning on doing. We'll be done within 2,000 kilometers. How's my shifter feel? Pretty, I don't know. I don't want to even try and judge it until I've been driving for like half an hour. Because it's whenever it gets really warm that it feels completely terrible. Thanks, man. Yeah. So normally this should return to center, and it doesn't really whenever it's warmed up. So before it would, now when I give it the slap test, it just stays over to the left. So whatever issue I have is affecting, I have the clutch in, by the way. Whatever issue I have is affecting this moving back and forth without even going into a gear. Like it's, yeah, like third, like look at how much pressure I'm putting on it. That ain't right. It's still drivable, so I'm not gonna do anything about it this second, but I may be taking the transmission out of the parts car and giving it a try. Full disclosure, whenever I took the drain bolt off the transmission, there was a little bit of metal. And I expect that anytime you miss a gear or crunch the transmission, that you might get a little bit of shavings in it, but that is a sign that it may be hurt. It may be hurting. So this may be related to the fact that there was some metal in it. It does still work fine and it is usable. It just takes a little bit of extra oomph to switch gears whenever it's hot, which is strange. Normally you'd think that it would get better the hotter it gets, but it's the smoothest whenever it's cold, and whenever it's hot, it's quite a bit of effort to get it in and out of gear sometimes. Anyway, that's a little bit annoying, but that's nothing compared to the fact that just a couple days ago the engine was sitting inside of my kitchen. So that is a humongous success. We have diagnosed, torn apart the engine, replaced the bearings, replaced the oil control rings, shimmed the regulators, replaced the pump, and we now have awesome oil pressure. Look at that. So it's fully warmed up right now, idling at 1400 RPM. And what would you say? I'd say that's at least 40, maybe 45. So that is excellent. That is excellent oil pressure. So fixed. We had to take the entire engine out of the car, tear it apart, put it back together to fix the problem. I was hoping we wouldn't have to do that, but it's done now. The Bratmobile is back in action. Wow, that is the least focused I've ever seen this camera. There we go. All right, so great success. Thank you for coming along for the journey on this exciting part of the RX-7 13B saga. And I'll see you in the next one, where we're going to get back to whatever the hell we were working on before the engine blew up. See you next time.